Welcome back to the channel. In this video, I really want to share with you guys what it took for me to get to where I'm at in my filmmaking career and share with you guys some of the success that I have had over the years of being a filmmaker and running multiple different businesses. So let's just dive right into it. So when I first started in my filmmaking career about 4 to 5 years ago, I don't have the typical come up story like a lot of videographers have. I didn't grow up knowing that I wanted to be a videographer. I didn't grow up even interested in cameras, and I didn't grow up making skating videos with my friends. Before I got into videography and freelancing, I was actually a music engineer. I wasn't doing it full time where I was just constantly having clients back to back. I was more so doing it in high school, and I would have friends who would make songs and I would just mix and master their songs, sometimes send it out to them. Occasionally I would get some people on Instagram who I would do songs for them and just produce their songs essentially. But it wasn't until I got connected with an artist who was getting a music video done from a videographer, and I went to that shoot. And as I was there, I was just so interested in the cameraman and what he was using and how he was moving and how he was directing. And after seeing the final result of the music video, it kind of just piqued the interest in me because I just seen the behind the scenes on what it took to film it, and then I seen the finished editing product, and I was just blown away by the whole creative process that goes behind shooting videos. So I went out and bought my first camera. I didn't do a ton of research. I just went out there and essentially just bought the same exact camera that the videographer that I was watching was using. He was using a Sony a6300. So I went and bought a Sony a6000. I remember I bought it off of Amazon for around $400 used. And then I bought two lenses. I bought a Sigma 35mm prime, and then I bought a Sigma 16mm. Didn't know much about primes, didn't know much about lenses, didn't know much about cameras at all. But after watching a couple of YouTube videos, a lot of people who went with the Sony Alpha series was always talking about the 16mm Sigma and the 35mm. So that's exactly what I bought. So after I bought that camera, not knowing pretty much how to use it, not knowing anything about it, I specifically just bought it because the cameraman who I saw had that camera and was using it. And it's funny, honestly, now I'm thinking about it, a lot of his career, he used that camera with the kit lens for all his shoots, which is mind blowing. I think even still to this day, he's still rocking that, which is so outdated. After purchasing that camera, I really had to figure out what it is that I wanted to film. I didn't know what I wanted to film, so I was just like any other videographer out there filming trees and filming videos and trying to just better learn the camera and understand it. I didn't know anything about color grading, color science, nothing. And if a lot of you guys know, Sony's older cameras, they weren't the best, honestly, especially when it comes to the color science. And after months and months and months of using this camera in the baked in picture profile, because I don't think the A6000 even has log, so everything was in the baked picture profile, and the image just didn't look that good. It honestly looked really washed out. Keep in mind, a Sony a6000 is primarily a photo camera, not really big in video, and I was using it for videos though. So now that I had the Sony a6000, it was time for me to start offering my music video service packages. At the time, I was charging about $50 for like a couple, maybe like a month or two, and then I upped it to like 100 later on, but I'll get into that in a minute. Initially, how I got my first couple of clients, again, like I told you, I was previously a music engineer. So the artists that I would do their songs for, I would just hit them up and be like, hey, I'm doing videos now. If you want, I can offer you a free music video. So I did that for a little while, for about a month or two. And then I started getting into paid work. I started doing that for a couple of years. And honestly, it was going really, really good. I even got a couple travel jobs. I remember I did a job in Atlanta and I did a job in Charlotte, North Carolina. But it wasn't until I came back from Charlotte, I believe. I was in Charlotte, North Carolina doing some work over there, and I was on vacation at the same time. And I believe when I was in Charlotte, I started watching videos about Canon cameras because I was happy with the A6000 back then. So, you know, just like any other videographer, it gets to the point where when you buy a practice camera, you want to evolve to the next camera, to the better camera, because you feel like essentially that you're getting better. And back then, 4 or 5 years ago, there was a whole debate going on with Canon color science versus Sony color science. And all the Canon fanboys were raving at how Canon color science was superior over Sony's color science, which honestly, it was true. Sony's color science back then wasn't the greatest. It wasn't the best. Canon did have better colors. So I hopped on the trend. I started seeing videos on YouTube of Canon cameras, and I was like, wow, those images look really, really good. And so I switched over. So when I came back from Charlotte, I went and bought my first Canon camera, which was a Canon EOS RP. And I remember when I bought that camera, I was like, yeah, like I'm certified now. Like, I have a Canon camera. I'm part of the Canon fanboys, and everything was just gonna be smooth then. So I remember I created a new video package, new offer for my video services. I kept the Sony a6000, so I had two cameras though, Sony a6000 and the Canon EOS RP, and I had one lens, I believe, with the RP. No, I had two lenses. So I had one Canon RF 24 to 105 f4, and then I had a Canon 50 millimeter. I think it's like the 1.8 one. It wasn't the RF. It was just the regular 1.8, the little tiny one with like the terrible focus breathing, that one. So those were the two lenses that I ran with the Canon EOS RP. And so because I had two cameras, now my prices went up because I felt like I was just that guy. I was next level. So I upped my prices. And I remember the A6000 cannot shoot 4K, but the RP can shoot 4K. But when it shoots 4K, it has a massive crop that is honestly unusable. And in 4K on the RP, you lose autofocus. So back then, I didn't know anything about manual focus. I didn't know anything about cinema lenses, none of that. So the fact that I lost autofocus in 4K, on top of that, I had a massive crop. It honestly was unusable. So when it came to my pricing, I remember that I had the A6000 camera package. I was offering that for about $100 per video shoot. And then I remembered with the RP, I offered $150 if someone wanted it in 4K, because I figured, you know what, it's in 4K, so I can charge more. So I did that. I charged $150 for 4K and then $100 for the Sony. Now, I did that in hopes that people would want the 4K package more than the 1080p package. But you know, when it comes to doing music videos, especially when you're working with a lower budget client, they all opted for the cheaper package. So then I found myself using the A6000 a whole lot more than using my new Canon EOS RP. So there was times where they would order the 1080p package and I would just bring the RP because I just wanted to use that camera and I wanted to play around with it. So I started doing that for a couple of months. And then again, I was just so obsessed with gear. I felt like if I had the top of the line gear, my images would just improve so much better, when really it was just my lack of skill and my lack of understanding, and me still being in the learning phase. So I went on YouTube once again and started looking at cameras again. I'm like, okay, the Canon RP is good, but it lacks the video features. Two cameras that I have both lack video features. Essentially, both these cameras are more photography based cameras. I didn't understand that. I didn't know that. So I'm like, I want a video first camera. Went on YouTube, typed in best video first cameras, budget friendly video first cameras under $1,200, because I was making money from videos, which honestly was surprising to me, but I wasn't balling out to where I could buy like an FX3 with an entire package. I wasn't balling like that, but I was making pretty good money for where I was at in life. So when I went on YouTube, I came across the Blackmagic Pocket 4K cinema camera. I didn't know anything about that camera. I didn't know nothing about sensors. I didn't know nothing about dual base ISOs. I didn't know nothing about color science. The only thing about that camera that I knew was that it didn't have autofocus, because it was a cinema camera. It's not like now with these newer cinema cameras, how they have autofocus. The 4K does not have autofocus. That's the only thing about that camera that I knew. So I saw a couple of videos on YouTube and I was like, wow, this looks really cool. And it's kind of big, you know, it makes me look more professional. So I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna go for it. So I went to my local camera store and I paid about $1,000. At that time, I sold the A6000. I sold it for a steal. I bought it for $400 and I sold it to a guy on OfferUp. He came from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and he bought it for $800. So I made profit. So I took that $800 and put it towards buying the Blackmagic Pocket 4K. So once I bought the 4K at my local camera store, I now had two cameras, the RP and the Blackmagic. So I dedicated the RP to more of my photography stuff, and then I used the Blackmagic for more video because it only does video. After getting the Blackmagic, I didn't have it long. I literally had it for about like a month and a half. So I really didn't get to fully experience it. But when I bought it, I just didn't like it. I didn't like the form factor. I didn't like the micro four thirds sensor. It really wasn't good in low light at all, especially when I didn't really know what I was doing. So it just didn't make it any helpful at all. And I remember with that camera, in my journey, I only owned two lenses, the Sigma 24 to 105, and then I owned a Mica 50 millimeter cine lens. That was the first cine lens that I ever owned, and I used it with the Blackmagic. I did do a couple music videos with that camera. I remember the first music video I did with that camera, I had the I don't know if I still have it, but it's a Rode Pro Plus, I think it's called. It's the big furry one that a lot of vloggers used to use back in the day. I don't remember what it's called exactly, but it was a Rode video microphone. And I did my first music video and I had it plugged into the Blackmagic, but I didn't set up the audio settings correctly. And so I forgot the speaker as well for this shoot, so we had to just use my phone, and I just had the phone in my pocket and I was just recording like that. So I was relying on the audio to be able to match it to the song in post. And so because I didn't set up the audio right on the Blackmagic, the whole music video didn't record any audio. So the editing was just a nightmare to try to sync his lips to the actual lyrics of the song. It was just so horrible. Again, just so many rookie mistakes that I made with that camera in the little time that I owned it. So fast forward, again, I was doing more and more music videos. At this time, I wasn't doing no corporate work. I didn't really want to get into much corporate work. I didn't really know much about corporate work. I didn't even know how to get my foot in the door of corporate work. So I just stick to what I knew, which was music videos. So fast forward about a month later, I took the Blackmagic on a trip to Mexico. I was like, you know what? Music videos are cool and all, but they're not really paying a whole lot. Like, I can't see myself living the life that I want to live just doing music videos, not providing enough money for me to be able to live comfortably, you know? So I started researching, what can I do to make money as a videographer? What are different niches that I can get into? And the first thing that popped up was weddings. And I was like, nope, I'm not doing weddings. Don't want to do it. Seems like a whole lot of work, a whole lot of stress that I just don't want. So that was out of the question. Music videos popped up again. And then I seen corporate work. And I was like, maybe I can get into this. I seen corporate interviews. I seen corporate events, which is what I do a ton of now, conferences, and I see some documentary stuff too. And I also wanted to get into documentary work as well. And then I seen commercial work, but I knew that I didn't have the skill set or knowledge at all to jump right into commercial work. So I kind of just wanted to start low. So I started with doing corporate work, but I knew, I was like, I don't like the Blackmagic camera and I don't want to use this for corporate work. So I need a camera that I can use for the corporate work. So as soon as I came back from Mexico, I sold the RP and the Blackmagic and sold it for the Sony a7S III. And then I bought, my first lens was a 85mm lens, which is a horrible first lens to buy when you're trying to get into corporate work. It's just too tight. You need something wider. So when I had the Sony a7S III, again, I didn't have that for long. That's when I also started taking my YouTube channel a lot more seriously. So I started posting a lot more consistently on YouTube. So in doing all of that, I was trying to figure out, how can I get my foot in the door of doing corporate work? So when I got the a7S III, I was like, okay, now I got the Sony camera, back to Sony. I know how to use Sony. This Sony camera is so much more better than the a6000. And I absolutely love the a7S III, but I was like, how can I use this camera now to get me corporate jobs? What it is that I can do to get my foot in the door. So I went to 2 different events that we host in my local area. One of them is like a food truck event that comes once a month every Thursday. And then another one was a farmer's market that happens every weekend. So I started going to my local farmer's market, my local food truck spots, and I didn't get paid for none of the work that I did for that. I simply just showed up, started capturing a ton of B-roll of people interaction, the food trucks, the farmer's market, people smiling. And I was doing that because I knew that I needed a portfolio to show clients what I can do and that I can do the work that I want to be contracted to do. So I did that for a little while, did a couple farmers markets because those were every single weekend versus the food truck was only once a month. I did a couple documentaries for fun with friends. Just, I had some friends who were like into clothing. I had some friends who was into music. I had some friends that were into art and paint. So I did a couple of documentaries for them, again, just to use for some portfolio pieces. And at that time when I had the a7S III, I was doing photography as well. I wasn't doing it full time where I was working in studios with a bunch of models and peoples and actors and all that stuff. No, I was never doing that. I knew that initially, first, one, I hated photos. I absolutely hated photos, but I will get asked time and time again, hey, can you take photos for me? And people would offer to pay me. And obviously I wasn't going to turn down some money. So I would do it, but I would do it reluctantly. Didn't want to do it. And it got to the point where every single time I had a photography shoot, in my head, I would just complain the entire shoot. Like, I really don't want to do this. I'm over here snapping 200 to 300 photos, having to edit them. I just hated it. I just dreaded the whole process of taking photos and editing them and sending them off. I just did not like it. But again, I would still do it because I would get people who would offer me money. Fast forward that after a couple documentaries, after a couple music videos and a couple photo shoots, I want to get deeper into the corporate work. I think it's time for me now to get my foot into the door. So I remember I sold the A7S III, and that's when I bought the FX6. So I was like, okay, now that I bought the FX6, this giant cinema camera, there's no reason why now I shouldn't be able to get the type of work that I want to do, because I have a lot more knowledge now than I did back then. My skill has greatly improved and my gear has improved, everything has improved. So after owning the FX6, I had a client who I previously worked with in the past. I took photos for this person and she reached back out to me a couple months later, and she had a boyfriend who was going to an event that he was a part of. He had a booth at the event with him and his whole team. And she reached out to me and was like, hey, my boyfriend is going to this event. We need a videographer. Do you think that you can do this event for us? And I was super thrilled. I was super excited for that. And all this was before I was posting behind the scene vlogs on YouTube. I wasn't posting behind the scene vlogs on YouTube. I wish I was, because I had so much content, honestly, but I wasn't doing that. But remember, I did the job for 3 days and I got paid $400. Completely underpaid. Like, I'm not accepting that now, but I did have my accommodations paid for. They did pay for my accommodations, they paid for my food, they paid for everything. Anything that I wanted and needed was completely covered. And I remember when I did this event, I was just super happy. I was super excited to be a part of this event, super excited to do it. And so after I filmed that event, I pretty much took the footage and used it for my portfolio piece. I pretty much used the entire event, honestly, because it was a massive event, my first ever massive event. I didn't always plan on being the videographer who just does a lot of events. It honestly happened, just fell into my lap, honestly. It's kind of what just gave me the push of my career, and I just been rocking on it ever since. So now I do tons of different type of events, corporate events, little small in-town events, holiday events, major league events. Actually, at the time of this recording, in a couple of weeks, I have an event at a college football that I'm going to try to post a vlog about on this channel. But my point is, I do a lot of events now. But yeah, I wanted to make this video because I have gained a lot of new subscribers, so thank you guys all for subscribing, and I want to share with you guys just my story, my experience. If you guys want a part 2 maybe on like my other business, how I got into that. Without further talking, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I'm gonna catch you guys in the next video. Nos vemos pronto.